Welcome to Art Kitchen. I'm Mo Golden, and I'm here with Robin Landsong, a visionary artist, craniosacral therapist, practitioner of singing medicine, and author. Robin is currently working on a memoir recounting her abduction from the U.S. as a child and her near-death experience in Rhodesia during the Rhodesian Bush War. Audiences at conferences, universities, and in the Olympia community where Robin lives are mesmerized by her presence, her resilience, poise, and deep connection to life and to death. You can learn more about Robin and follow along with the progress of her upcoming memoir at robinlandsong.com. This is just the first of a two-part interview, so make sure you check out both. Hey Robin, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks.
So I just want to jump in and ask if you've always been an artist or if there was like a moment in your life when you realized it or decided that you were an artist.
I drew all the time as a kid and especially did spirograph. That was the highlight of everything for me. I just did spirograph and I look at them now. I actually got them back from my parents and pages of really amazing for a child hand dexterity. Just it pleased me so much to do a perfect one, and it wasn't an obsessive thing. It was just it delighted me so much, and so I spent hours and hours doing spirograph, and then I would also do big abstract paintings on paper and then cut them out into snowflakes. And just I spent a fair amount of my childhood playing alone because I was part deaf. And so it was easier than explaining to other kids that I couldn't always hear them. And it was really satisfying to do the art and create beauty in my world because it was rather stressful.
And was it always visual art that you were working on, drawing and painting and things like,
Oh, and I did paint by numbers too.
Cool. And then as you got older, you always just continued to do work, to do art, and so it's always been a part of your life for you.
I would say I went underground during some of my adolescence, and then a little bit in high school, but more narrow, because my life was more narrow at that time. And then when I went to college, I focused in architecture. And that was the first place anyone asked me to combine my intelligence and my creativity. And I just exploded with creativity that year. It was one of the best years of my entire education to that point.
Cool. Yeah, I can see that with the detail work that you do still. Yeah, I can see how it's related to architecture. That's cool.
And it was a really very radical professors who would, the first project we did was they came in and they had very little instruction, and they came in and they set a piece of ice on a piece of paper for each person, and they said, draw that as it's melting. That was our first architecture assignment.
Whoa.
And what happened for me is I just did what I thought of, which was drawing the rings as the puddle went out. And everybody else did it in the little square blocks of this rendering of the sequence. So we put them all up, and mine was the only one that was different out of 90 architecture students.
Wow.
And I thought, oh no, I'm gonna get in trouble. And they went right to it and they said, whose is this? This is great. And I thought, really? For the first time in my life, being different was great. So it really encouraged me to open up and be me. And at the end of the year, they went from these very abstract concept projects to getting actually more architecture projects. And as soon as it started to get some boxes around it and some parameters, I couldn't think. I couldn't come up with something. And I realized I'm an artist, not an architect. And so I changed colleges.
Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. I feel like everybody's story is really non-linear, and it's really cool when you can look back and see how at the time you couldn't, it probably felt like you failed and you made a mistake, you can't be an architect, and then to look back and see how it just informs the next wave of decisions. And
I think because they honored that I was different and I have just a different way of perceiving and thinking, then it felt more like an evolution. And there might have been people who I didn't really feel, because I chose it. I chose to leave. I could have easily gone on. And one of the things that was so valuable about that environment, which I think is really relevant to our conversation, is that it was 4 floors of like the first year students up to the 5th year students. And it was a mecca of creativity and intelligence in one space. So if I got stuck, I would just go walk and look at people's projects and see what people were doing. And people were so passionate there that they literally built their bed underneath their desk and slept there because they were so much about their projects. Architects were geeks and we didn't really have social lives. So, and yeah, I could go to the pottery studio and there was always some film happening and there was a whole library of the history of architecture and there was just every kind of resource, a metal shop and a wood shop. So if I could conceive of it, I could make it there. And that bloomed me open and was the biggest gift in my education to that point.
Yeah, cool. How do you feel like your relationship with your work or your motivations or reasons for creating has changed, like, you know, from the time you were a child and then as a student and now?
When I was little, I was giving myself the inspiration and the hope that beauty existed. And like I was saying, my upbringing was very stressful, and so to be able to touch that, it was like giving myself a picture of the divine and putting it as a material thing in front of me.
Yeah.
And so it was really a central part of my survival and part of not having my joy and my essence just go completely underground. And so, and I would say, you know, like I said, in adolescence, it did somewhat. And now, let's see, so there was the architecture program that brought it out in bringing my intellect and my creativity together. And then in my 30s, it was more about my healing process and giving myself my own story visually. And there's a great phrase from Alex Gray that I love about art is making the invisible visible.
Yeah.
And so I was showing myself my own story back for years. And it's not art I really share now. It was very much from my process.
Yeah.
And it was essential for getting truth out on paper and getting really painful stuff out, recorded that in ways that it didn't matter whether it was messy or pretty, or it just was about getting it out. And I would buy big pads of newsprint and just go through them. And sometimes I'd be getting anger out, and so it would be digging through the pad and it'd be just ripping through them. So it was very physical and kinesthetic in that way. And so I think that's a really important piece to get across to people, that if you know, there's times where we're going for beauty, for art, and then there's times we're going for healing, and that's messy.
Yeah.
And probably should be. And you know, by the time I was done, I would have my art materials all over me. And I had kind of a spot on the floor where I practically had a tarp, just so I could not have to worry about what happened to the carpet. And I would just rip things up and make a mess. And that was the process. And there was one painting where I was ripping canvas and like just splattering it on. And in the end, it did turn out to be something that was a really valuable reflection for me. But the process itself was very kinesthetic, very tangible, and important that I was, you know, ripping and scraping and doing the actions that matched the emotion.
Yeah, and it's funny, you're saying two things that seem like they would be contradictory, but I know that they're not. One is that the creation mirrors something back to you, and the other is that you're getting something out of you. Right. And I think a lot of people, especially with difficult emotions, feel afraid sometimes to engage in the creative process because they don't want to see the messy stuff or the scary stuff mirrored back to them. Can you talk a little bit, like, you know, you're talking about anger, about your experience, like witnessing that anger once it came out? Like, was that scary coming back at you, or what was the experience of seeing what had come out once you got it out?
At a certain point in my healing process, I became just confident enough that healing was worth it, and that the going through the messy gets to freedom. And if I can convey nothing else to people, it's that process is valuable, even if it doesn't look so at the time, of getting to freedom where you have options in yourself, and that you're not having repressed trauma or repressed emotions make decisions for your life, but that you get to bring them up, have them be conscious, have them be seeable, and then you have the freedom to choose your life, not just from these unconscious things, but making the choices for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful.
And I had a huge collection of, all these images that, like I say, they were, some of them were just, and it was important what materials I used at that time, because the oil pastels are really fast. And it's really gratifying, and you can smear them. And I think that that's a really key element. Whereas I found watercolor to be it's a more careful process. Otherwise you just get mud, which maybe mud's satisfying too. So I never found watercolor to be my medium. And so now that I have a different goal and I'm at a different place in what I'm trying to achieve, that the color pencils and the refinement and the detail I can get is my medium. So I would really encourage people to change mediums and try all mediums. And that's what I really made use of in my later college years, was making use of the facilities and doing pottery and doing animation stand and doing printmaking, things that would cost thousands of dollars to set up. And so making use of the facilities where they already had it, and seeing, how do I think in this medium? What does this medium inspire in me? And like wood block cuts, totally not inspiring for me, way too slow. But for somebody else, that might be just the thing that might be, the chipping out might be what gets their process clicking. So I would say explore a lot of mediums, try different things out, try different pens, try paints, and see what is it that actually brings you joy and gets your creative expression going in that.
Cool, yeah. And so right now for you in your process, why do you create? What motivates or inspires you, and what are you doing now? Are you still working out and processing things for yourself, or creating beauty, or how has that process evolved for you?
That's a great question. It's come full circle. And now there's freedom in creating beauty, and it's a very deeply spiritual process. And so my role is to surrender and be the hands of the creator, of the divine, and let stories come through that way. And so my job is, to have done my background work have the paper, have the pencils, have my desk set up, have it be clean and clear. And so each time I do a drawing, I clean everything off, so it's sacred space. And because kind of take everything away from the last drawing. And then I do my preparation, I get some visual images to work from. And because I am going for realism, I need good photographs to work from. And then I surrender. And I do prayer. And I literally bow my head down on the blank paper after I've done some warm-up, so I'm in the groove. And I just ask to be opened up and let it come through me. And what has usually gone into it beforehand is that some kind of communication from the divine has come through, whether that's in a dream or a vision. Literally, I close my eyes and I see the start of the image. And my favorite way is people. People will say something to me. You were a spark for the last drawing. I usually get things 3 times. And so I went to your talk, and you did the turtle drawing for the group.
Yeah.
And then I had my own spark that I was in my office looking at my first turtle drawing, and I thought, there's another space on my wall. I should do another turtle to match that. And then I got home, and there was a message from one of my clients, and her toddler was looking at my first turtle drawing and said, "Mama, it's sad." And she said, "Why?" he said, because it needs another friend. And she knows my process
she knew she had to give you that message.
And so she kind of interviewed him and said, well, what do you mean? Does there need to be another turtle? And this toddler, whose language is still developing, he said, yes, Mama, this turtle needs a friend. She needs to make it like there needs to be another one. So she messaged me right away, and I was like, okay, I just got divine instructions through a toddler.
Yeah.
Excellent. Best source ever.
Yeah. Pure channel.
So I did my second turtle drawing.
And who are these images for? So that's a little bit of where they come from, but why? Why are they coming through, or where are you taking them?
So right now I'm drawing the series that's illustrating my experience where I had an experience where I died and came back. So usually it's called a near-death experience. I like to just, for mine, say I died and came back because I wasn't near death, I was in death. And I really crossed over to the other side. So I am giving myself the assignment of giving images for that. And that has been an incredible process of, again, taking the invisible to be visible. And I'm describing these really, sometimes very etheric experiences and giving an image. And what it does is, one of my reasons for doing that is to help people not fear dying. Or for those who have lost somebody to know that their person who died went home to beauty. And so I showed the drawing series. I had 4 owls that was me, the owls represented me crossing over and being in the tunnel. And so I showed this to a friend of mine her father had just died. And she looked at them and she touched them and she started to cry and she said, I don't have to worry anymore. I know he's gone home and he's held. And even though his beliefs were different than mine, just to reassure her that he's home, he's held, he's in this place that's light and beauty, and so that was really deeply reassuring to her.
Yeah. So in some ways it sounds like the work that you were doing with your personal process was cleaning you out, but also practice for bringing something through in a way that can mirror back purely. And now you're not having to do that for your own process, but you're doing it for other people's process.
And I think that we do our personal healing, and we always, to some level, continue that. And then if we're able to, if we have the good fortune to open that up and do group healing or collective healing. And that is a really great honor to be on that level. And sometimes I don't know who the drawing is for or who it might touch. I just did a series of 4 monarch butterflies because I had a dream that was very, very strong. And at a certain point in the dream, a door opened up and there were 4 monarch butterflies that were about 2 feet big. And I was mesmerized by them, and I knew each of them had a story to tell me. So I knew my next drawing was a series of 4 monarchs. So I did one that was birth, and then life, and then death, the actual crossing into death, and then the afterlife. And the afterlife one, I was drawing, and it was kind of these bright colors, and I didn't like it very much. And usually I feel, at some point in my drawing, I feel like, oh, this one's not really working out, but I'll finish it because I like to complete things. And so at a certain point, I was talking in my mind to the source that gives me the images, and I said, I don't really like this one. and they said, it doesn't really matter. It's not for you.
Whoa.
Just kind of be quiet and do your job. And I thought, oh, I get it. It's like commissioned to work for somebody I've never met. Okay. And I've just gotten over and over again of times of people finding an image that really speaks to them in ways I wouldn't expect. One woman bought a print for her daughter and gave it to her daughter. And when she did, her daughter received it and she held it in her hands and she looked at her mom and said, how did she get into my dream?
Whoa.
And one of the highest compliments I've ever gotten is a woman who, her mother had died and she was getting ready to be cremated. And so she went through a bin of my art prints and was listening to her mother, and her mother was kind of giving a request with which print she wanted with her when she was cremated. So she actually, put it out of the sleeve and laid it on her mother, and it was part of her ashes. I thought, I don't think it gets any better than that as far as a compliment.
Yeah, and I think all artists to some extent do wonder, what is this for? And those are some strong answers for what your work is for. That's really, really powerful. So you talk a little bit more about what your process is like. You were talking about cleaning off the drawing table and making sacred space and really opening up and making yourself available. And then you talked a little bit about having a moment every time with every drawing where you're like, meh, I don't know about this. But can you walk us through like how you actually receive the imagery and what the different stages of the process are?
So I skipped past it a little bit, but that practice of surrendering, it isn't for sissies. It's really scary. And what I want to get across to people is to not give up once they hit the first crux. Keep going. Because in the beginning, my drawings really don't look like very much. There's artists who can just freehand out something great, and that isn't my process. If you saw me just freehand something, you wouldn't be that impressed. It takes many, many hours for me to get something that's satisfying for me, and especially in colored pencil, it really doesn't look good at first. And so I really encourage people to get past that first barrier of, oh, whatever, I can't really draw. But keep going, keep opening up, keep listening, keep finding out, and curiosity is the key. And so one of the ways I know what to draw is I listen. And maybe I have some advantage about I'm already born and a highly intuitive person, and then I had the near-death experience, so that really opened me up. But I even listen. I just put my hand over my color pencils and I say, give me instructions. Which color? And then I see which one kind of is a little bit shinier, a little bit more attractive, or which one just says kind of a little yes to me. And so I pick that up and I say, okay, tell me what to do now. I'm just the humble hands here.
Yeah, you're just making yourself really receptive.
And sometimes it'll go directions that I don't understand. There's one of the drawings that's about when I was lifting off up out of my body and starting to ascend and go into the tunnel. I was doing that drawing, and it's 3 turtles, and kind of there's just like a little baby turtle that's kind of me in physical form, and then a turtle that's starting to get a little bit softer around the edges, and that's me lifting off. And then there's a very soft, very ribbony, kind of just hint of a turtle. And something started happening in the center of it that I didn't understand at all, but I kept going with it, and I kept being curious. And I thought, what is this about? I don't even have any idea. And it took a good 25 minutes before I backed up and I saw that it was cell mitosis. And that moment where the cells divide, they replicate the DNA information, then they divide. And then they become 2 complete cells all on their own. And every time I try to draw about dying, people always say, is this a drawing about birth? Is this about the start? Is this about creation? And so now I don't even tell people sometimes. Actually, it's about when I was dying. So if I had tried to control it or know what I was doing, I probably would have made it into something that made sense into me, and I would have really mashed the life out of what Spirit was telling me. And so to not know, to be humble enough to go forward when you don't know, that takes courage, because it's not coming from me. And that's the beauty, and that's what I think the magic is. And that's why it's so exciting to show my work to people, because then they finish the story. Somebody just said to me the other day, it's actually one of my owl drawings, and it's up in my office where I do healing sessions. And she said, oh, it's a brain, right? Because she's coming to see me for brain treatment. And I laughed, and I'd never seen it that way, because it's literally, I drew from I think a snowy owl face. And so it's anatomically correct, and I'd never seen it as a brain before. So for her, in my relationship with her, that's what it represented in that moment.
Yeah.
And other people see, somebody else just told me that they saw birth in it. So I start it, and if I can be pure and hooked in enough to some universal story, then everybody's going to find something for it in them. And that's why I like there being so many artists, because the way I say it or the way I speak it may not land for somebody, but the way you draw it might land better for them. And or the way they draw it for themselves is what is really going to be the communication of their own heart.
Yeah. So you're talking about your healing sessions too, and your artwork being in your healing space, and you talked a little bit about your personal creative process being related to your personal healing. Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship that you see between healing and the creative process, or even just for you, the crossover there between healing and creativity?
Yeah, I want to give a story from one of my sessions. A woman I was working with, and she came to me because she couldn't really connect to her creativity anymore, and that brought her a lot of grief. And I think everybody's different in terms of how much they have to do a creative process. And there are those people who they have to do it as part of wellness, as part of health, as part of their mental health, their physical health, and their spiritual health. And and then I think there's people who maybe they're more kinesthetic, and they must go run. And if they don't do that, then they've got some kind of distress going on, or not replenishing themselves. So I was working with a woman who creativity really is a part of her well-being, and she must do it. And I was feeling like we were getting closer to a belief that wasn't serving her. And we dropped in, got really still, and what came out for her is that she had a vision of a time where she had gone out in the morning on a boat by herself, like a little rowboat, and she had her drawing pad, and she was drawing, and the scene was incredibly beautiful. And sometimes it's always hard to get that on a little square piece of paper with your limited medium.
Even with a photograph, it doesn't really capture it.
Exactly, because there's senses, there's the wind, there's the smell. And so she drew for a while and flipped her page and drew for a while, and then she looked back over what she had drawn, and then she told herself, I'm no good. And that's heartbreaking. And that's sort of like self-violence. And if I can help people shift that, then I really want to get that across to people. Please don't be violent to yourself around giving yourself the space to take it further. Like maybe it's about taking that sketch back home and sitting when you have better lighting or better materials, or maybe it's 10 years from now you can really draw that because you've had the life experience to express it. So really coming home to ourselves and giving ourselves permission to mess up, to not have it look good, to do 10 drawings that look like crap, to learning our process. Because one of the things I do in the beginning, because I want color pencils you can't really erase very well. And so I don't like to spend a lot of time like finding the proportions and then getting 5 hours into the drawing and then realize I got the proportions wrong. So what I do is I find a image that I really like, and then I put it on a light table, I trace it on tracing paper, and then I go over that onto my main paper so I get all the points of reference, so that and then I can fill it in from there. And what I start with is very light, and the color I have to take it from there, and I have my other image that I'm looking from, and I'm filling in. So it took me a while to accept that process, and then I was telling myself I should be one of those artists that can just freehand draw this and get the proportions correct, but I don't enjoy that part. That's a struggle of erasing and going back and then checking, and so what I enjoy is the filling it in, the being in the relationship with the animal that I'm drawing, and the listening to it through my heart. And I don't enjoy the technical part. So I kind of get through that part in the beginning till I have my layout. And, and then the spirographs are all freehand, and all the kind of ribbons are all freehand, and I love that part. And the beginning is a little bit agonizing because it looks like nothing for good 2 or 3 hours. and I stay with it because I've done it enough times that I have complete faith. And so that's what I want to encourage people to do, is stay with it. If it means that by hour 10 of drawing, or day 10, or, week 10, whenever, stay with the process. Commit to yourself. Commit to what's possible. Commit to keep going. And don't abandon yourself along the way. And don't, as best you're able, don't be violent to yourself along the way. And some of the things we say to ourselves they're violence.
Yeah.
And I went to a great workshop with Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist teacher, and she said, don't add another drop to the problem in the world of unkindness. Just stop and just add a bucket to kindness, compassion, self-kindness.
And that, we really can do that starting with ourselves. And that those little chattery things that we're saying is contributing one way or the other. So we may as well be chattering sweet things in our ears. Yeah.
And saying, I don't know, or I don't know how to do this yet.
Yeah.
Or I don't have mastery yet. Those are in the category of self-kindness. Or I need a teacher.
And it's so cool to hear you say, like, your finished art is photorealistic and like so precise, and it's so cool to hear you say that your sketches are not beautiful and not good, because I feel that way about my artwork too, and that like a bad painting just isn't a finished painting, and it's like, the people who end up with bad paintings are the people who stopped while it was bad.
Right.
And it's just like really, I just feel so much truth in that. And for me, that really does relate to your work as a healer, healing yourself and other people, that like not abandoning yourself along the way rings so true to me, of like, you're not well, or you're not doing well, you're not a pretty picture right now. Let's keep going.
Right. You wouldn't just give up on a person because they have an illness or they're not grown up yet. And I want to just come back to that story with the woman. So she turned that belief around, and then when her
the woman with the boat in the picture, okay.
And so in that session, she really sat with, I don't want to do that to myself anymore. And she got to that revelation, and she got to that she's fine, she's good enough, she's permission to draw. And so when her beloved pet was dying, and I said, why don't you draw the process? And she did. And she brought those pictures to me, and they were amazing. And she recorded better than a photograph, because then she could draw her pet spirit leaving, and she could draw the love and the relationship better than a photograph. And so it's that self-permission. And then she got more out of her pet dying experience, because she was so present in the creative process and in the observing process, and now she has these drawings to remind herself of how she felt being that connected to that animal.
Thanks for watching, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. We want as many people as possible to find out about the inspiring artists who come on Art Kitchen. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/MoGoldenVideos, and you can support the project at patreon.com/Mo.